Well, it is Friday,
It
Tyler, and one of the things that we always like to do in our house, order pizza.
Good
On
idea.
Friday, because my
Good
husband
idea.
works from home. I usually don't want to cook by Friday night, so it is a good night to do that. And I'll tell you what, the perfect person to talk to us about pizza right now, Melody Baetens with us here on the MegaCast. She's a restaurant critic and reporter for the Detroit News. Thank you for being with us as usual.
Thanks for having me.
So you just did a big story about pizza. How many slices of pizza have you eaten over the past few days?
Luckily, we just got small pizzas for this big piece I did for the Detroit News, and they were Detroit style. So, a small is literally 4 slices a lot of times. So there wasn't too much there wasn't too much of a pizza mountain to climb.
I will say,
yeah.
I judged it was like one of these judges at like a pizza thing at, I don't know, farmer's market somewhere, and I was so sick of pizza by the end of the night. It was like 30 different kinds of pizza. It was, and in the beginning you start out eating like full pieces, and then by the end you're like, half a bite. So what did you find? What even made you want to do this, by the way?
So I wrote a story in Detroit style pizza, which is a specific, kind of pizza. It was developed here in back in the last century in the 40s and the 50s, and has really grown nationally. Detroit style pizza is square pizza where the cheese goes to the crust, to the edge. A lot of times the sauce is ladled on top, so it's not tucked under the cheese, which kind of protects the dough and keeps it really airy and light. And it's just been gaining in popularity. Yelp released a 2021 trend report that had literally said Detroit style pizza is going national, and it's pointed to like a 56% increase in searches for Detroit style pizza, or reviews that said Detroit style pizza. Also, Pizza Hut came out with their own version of our city's pizza, and there's a national brand that has many locations. I think they're one of the biggest pizza brands in the country. And we're also just seeing more Detroit-style pizzerias open in places like New York, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh. A place called Via 313 just opened in Austin. There's Blue Pan in Denver. So it's really spreading out. And at the same time, this year, 2021, is the 75th anniversary of Buddy's in Detroit at Conant and 6 Mile, where it kind of all started. So
if you go to Buddy's, you have to go to the original Buddy's.
Absolutely. But they've got 19 locations now, so they've really spread out through Michigan, over the last 75 years. So I kind of dug into the history of what makes Detroit-style pizza, where it originated, who were the players, and then talked about, its growing popularity. Even in Detroit, there's a lot of new pizzerias. Michigan and Trumbull's a great example. Grandma Bob's not too far from them, both in Corktown. Como's in Ferndale is a completely new restaurant than it was, a couple of years ago. They've got a great example of Detroit-style pizza. It was really cool to dig into the history of the square pizza and how it kind of, we used to just call it square pizza, but lately it's been Detroit's own style, and I really think it holds up to New York slices and Chicago's deep dish, and I think we'll be hearing more about it, especially this year as Buddy's celebrates 75 years.
Okay, local controversy, Melody. You mentioned Detroit. You mentioned Detroit style. You then mentioned how it compares to other styles like New York style, and then you mentioned Chicago style. A little controversy around Chicago style and a debate of whether or not it is pizza or some other concoction that is pizza adjacent. What is your opinion on Chicago style? Is it pizza or is it fake?
Oh, I think it's definitely its own style of pizza. I think pizza has a lot to do with the sauce and the dough. And so long as they're making fresh dough and, putting good sauce on it, I think everything else is open to interpretation. And so, I think it's pizza. I mean, it's almost a lasagna. Some people call it a pizza casserole. But yeah, it's pizza. It's got sauce, cheese, and good base dough. Crusty bread at the bottom, and that's what you need for pizza.
What's one of the most surprising things you discovered in writing this piece?
I think that I didn't realize, I kind of knew, but I didn't realize how intertwined everything was. Gus Guerrero opened Buddy's in 1944. He started selling pizza there in 1946. And then he sold it just a couple years later. And when he sold it to these guys that were known as the two Jimmys, Big Jimmy and Little Jimmy, they owned Buddy's for a couple years, and they hired this guy named Louis. And Gus, who founded Buddy's, taught Louis how to make this style pizza. Then Gus went on to open Cloverleaf in East Point, which was called East Detroit back then. And then Louis left Buddy's after a couple of years when they sold it again, and he went down the street to Shields and started making Detroit-style pizza there. And then after a couple of years, he opened his own pizzeria in Hazel Park, which we know is Louis', one of the best Detroit-style pizzerias in Metro Detroit, and his grandson Nicholas still owns Louis today. So it's all connected, and a lot of it happened. A lot of it happened in the 70s, of the moving around and the spreading around of the pizza.
I've never tried Louis. Was there a little bit of like rivalry at all between them when they were selling and reopening and moving around?
I think that there might have been, but the story that's told now is pretty fair, and everyone's just happy to be selling pizza still after decades and decades. I talked to Gus Guerrero's his daughter Marie for the story. She and her brother Jack still run Cloverleaf in East Point. They have several locations for carryout around town, and they're just, they know that Buddy's is considered the original, but that Buddy's gives credit to their dad as well. So it's a multifaceted history, all revolving around this square pizza. It was pretty fun to research.
So recently we had Dave Portnoy in town who went around and was doing all of these pizza taste tests, which he's kind of known for. Did you watch some of the videos?
Yes, I did. And I talked to Freddie in Melvindale, Freddie the Pizza Man. I interviewed him. He was overwhelmed after Barstool Sports came and they gave him a great review, and he's still just trying to keep up with orders. He told me, he makes his dough overnight. The reason his pizza is so good is because he spends so much time on the dough. It has to be made at a certain time. It has to have a certain amount of time in the fridge. It has to rise for a certain amount of time. So he can't just, when he runs out, whip up another batch. He really has to, take the time and plan it out. So when he runs out, he's out. And he was happy, especially since it was an opportunity for him to raise some money for his autism charity, which is, I believe, also called Freddie the Pizza Man. And he hopes that he can get pizza in the hands of everyone that wants one, because it really was a shock to his business, and lines out the door early in the morning. So you might have to be patient if we want a slice of Freddie's for a while.
But I do love that story because he's kind of a one-man show there, but also his nonprofit work that he is doing, and it lifted his story, but I felt like it also gave a little bit of positivity to the Detroit area, which we need right now, especially after the American Lafayette Coney Island debacle and the city citing them. So we needed some love right now.
Yeah, it was a good, it was fun to watch some of those videos and see the reaction. And, he takes one bite, and then the pizzeria is busy for the next week at least.
But on top of that, we are still in the middle of the pandemic, and so many other restaurants are struggling. How has it been for the pizza joints? Do they survive? Because it's more of a carry-out food for a lot of people.
It's a great question. With the carry-out being a big thing, pizza is very, it holds up to being delivered, to being carry-out, even to being frozen and shipped across the country. But we are in a pandemic, and I did ask Buddy's and Cloverleaf how it's been, and they said overall, while there's been ups and downs as indoor dining opens and closes, they're down about 25 to 30% for 2020 compared to 2019. So hopefully this year will be a little more stable for them, and for all restaurants as well, because we are still seeing the effects. Even though we're open at 25% now, it's not a lot, and I think we're going to see some more restaurants close as we did last year.
Yeah, it appears as if the governor is not going to be reducing those restrictions anytime soon. I think they're going to at least be through St. Patrick's Day, which is such a popular time for so many of these restaurants. So what else is happening kind of on the restaurant beat? Anything opening, new restaurants during this time?
Yeah, amazingly, there are a lot of different kinds of restaurants that are preparing to open. I'm seeing some delays. Places that were hoping to be open by March are now saying April, which is to be expected anyway, but especially during a pandemic when supply chains can be interrupted and construction and city offices, approving things. But we are going to see some new restaurants opening up. One I'm really excited about is in downtown Detroit. It's called the Detroit Beer Exchange. And this is a sister location to their original in Kalamazoo. And it's a beer hall, but the prices are all kind of done like the stock market, where if a beer is not selling well, the price might be cheaper, or if a beer is really popular that day, they might raise the price. And they have this proprietary technology that keeps track of it all. And so the prices ebb and flow, and they might have like a bust or a bubble, and like all the prices might, dip for a happy hour or something like that. They're going to have, this is on Washington, just walking distance from like the Fox Theater and Comerica Park over there. They're going to have a pizzeria inside, and there's also a game room, and then the bar and restaurant. So I don't know exactly when they're opening, but I think that's going to be a fun one for downtown, especially as we get into baseball season. I think that's going to be a big attraction.
What is on your must-eat list right now?
Oh, geez. Well, not pizza, because I'm kind of over it.
Right. So Pino's, though, did their new one finally open? I think they were opening one over there in the New Center area. Did it open yet?
They're open for carryout. They opened this week for carryout. Also a new center, I really want to get over to Bob Fair. That's a African restaurant and market that just opened a week or so ago. I think they're open for carryout, maybe some dine-in. They also have their own brand of juice and hot sauce. So I definitely want to get in there and check them out. I also recently popped into Great Lakes Pot Pie Company. Yeah, Great Lakes Pot Pies in Clawson down 14 Mile. A friend told me about it, and they have ready to pop in the oven chicken pot pies, meatball pot pies, and quiches, and tried it out. It's really good. If you're looking for dinner but don't want to cook but want something freshly made in the oven, it's a good option.
That sounds really yummy.
Yeah, it was. The chicken pot pie was...
And better too, because there's the one that you can get from Costco. I don't know if you've ever had it, Tyler, but you go and it's like $20, but it's like humongous. So unless we're having a brunch party or something, which we don't do anymore because we don't have people over to the house, my husband and I are eating chicken pot pie for like days. And then you're so sick of it. You're like, I cannot eat pot pie any longer. So how long do you think some of these restaurants can survive the way they're going without the restrictions being at least lifted to 50%?
I think it depends on if we'll see some more grants from the government, the state or federal. I think if there's more help coming, then some of them will survive. It depends on the restaurant, honestly. Some of them have been doing okay with carryout only, but some of them are really about the dine-in experience, and it's really about sitting there and the wine list and being inside the space that was created for this reason, for dine-in. So I think this week we saw 2 restaurants announce they were closing: the Andiamo Dearborn and the Novi Library Sports Pub, which has been a Novi for 25 years. I talked to the owner there, and he just said after a year of bleeding, he just can't take any more loss, and he's just going to close. Their location in West Bloomfield will stay open, so he will still have a bar and restaurant. But 25 years is a long time, and I'm sure that was a really hard decision for him. But he said they are used to catering to big groups in Novi, and they really can't do that right now. He also said staffing was a problem, so their last day is going to be, I believe, the last Sunday in March.
Melody Baetens with us here on the MegaCast. She's the restaurant critic and reporter for the Detroit News. I've been out to some restaurants, high-end and dive bars, and on both sides, it seems, let's just say that 25% capacity limits being loosely followed. Are you seeing that as you've been out and about? Because for some of these restaurants, they're saying, I'll risk a fine at this point in time. I need to try to make some money.
We're definitely seeing restaurants taking the risk. I think every week the Michigan Liquor Control Commission releases a batch of places that they've slapped with temporary suspensions for not following the rules, whether it be for social distancing, capacity, or masks. So I think you're right. I think places are, some of them are, asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And also the rules are, at first the rules were kind of vague, where it was like 25 capacity indoors. There was the curfew, but people weren't sure if they had to shut down outdoor capacity before the curfew, and there was a lot of questions at first. And I think people, these restaurants are just trying to do their best to keep their employees busy and keep afloat. Some of them are thriving, some of them are just doing okay, and some of them, like we saw this week, will decide to close. I think we'll lose more restaurants as the spring goes on.
You know what's been one of the confusing things is who is doing the fining? Is it the, MIOSHA? Is it your local health department? Which one is issuing a fine that could get you to lose your liquor license versus just a citation for maybe not following some of the rules or, staying open later than that 10 p.m. curfew?
I'm seeing the MLCC, the Liquor Control Commission, because that's one tool they have. Is if they suspend your liquor license, that's a huge way to make money for a lot of these restaurants. And you have to go to a hearing and get it sorted out, and there's usually a fine. And that's just they're sending people in and they're busting them for breaking one rule or the other. And I think there's been a couple dozen since September that they've slapped a fine on or a temporary suspension. And it's all over Michigan.
Melody Baetens with us. She's a Detroit News restaurant critic and reporter joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. And on that note, Melody, obviously these restaurants want to remain COVID safe. They've been doing their best to do that throughout this pandemic, but they are also really struggling to stop the bleeding of their pocketbooks and keep their employees employed. With that, and with the restaurant limits being capacity limits being something that the governor has said earlier on in the week in a press conference is not likely to be one of the next restrictions to be loosened. What are the restaurants' thoughts on the capacity limits? Because obviously 25% is a very low mark. They've already expressed frustration with that. Wanting to remain COVID safe, where do they see a safe capacity limit being limited, that they could be open at a partial capacity and still maintain a safe environment?
I think their thoughts are as varied as, people in Michigan's thoughts. Some of them are like, there's a pandemic, we need to follow the rules, we understand, we're going to do our best, but you need to help us monetarily survive or we're not going to. And others are like, no one's gotten sick, we don't understand why we have to, have this low capacity when the numbers are low. So it varies, because I've talked to a lot of different types of restaurant owners, people that work in restaurants, and their attitudes are as different as people on the street that you talk to. But I will say that the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, which is an advocacy group for the restaurant owners, they really want to see a plan set out by the state government that follows the COVID numbers as they go down or as vaccination rates go up. They want to be able to see restaurants open back up